All right, let's talk about a case that has haunted America for decades. We've got a child beauty queen, this incredibly strange ransom note, and a crime scene that was just a mess from the very beginning. Today, we're diving deep into the mystery of JonBenét Ramsey. You ever wonder what makes a certain case stick with you? Like, really get under your skin? Is it the people involved, maybe? Or just how baffling the evidence is? Or maybe it's just the quiet. The fact that after all this time, we're still left with nothing but questions. Well, for so many people, that unforgettable case is the death of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey back in 1996. It's a story that kicked off nearly 30 years ago and honestly has mystified all of us ever since. Okay, so let's get into it. The scene is Boulder, Colorado. The date is December 26, 1996. What started as a Christmas tragedy would quickly become one of the most puzzling crime scenes imaginable. Everything kicked off with what seemed like a kidnapping. It began with a frantic 911 call from Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mom. She's on the phone telling the dispatcher her daughter is gone and that she's found a ransom note, a really chilling one, right there on the back staircase. But right away, this ransom note just screamed weird. First off, it was super long. We're talking almost 3 pages. Then there's the ransom amount, $118,000. That is such a specific number, right? And get this, it was almost the exact amount of a recent work bonus John Ramsey, her dad, had gotten. But here's the kicker. The note was written on a notepad that belonged to the Ramseys with a pen from their house. It just didn't add up. So you've got the family and the police all waiting by the phone, expecting a call from these supposed kidnappers. But that call never came, because this was not a kidnapping. The real horror was so much closer to home. In fact, it was already in the house. A few hours go by, and a detective suggests to John Ramsey, hey, why don't you search the house again, just in case? So he does, and that's when he finds her, down in a small, rarely used room in their own basement. And just like that, this case completely changed. It went from a kidnapping to a murder. Now, this is where things get even more complicated, because right from the start, the investigation itself was a mess. We're talking about critical errors that basically set this case up for decades of confusion. Okay, so check this out. Because the police thought it was a kidnapping, they didn't treat the house like a murder scene. It wasn't properly secured at all. Friends, family, they were just wandering in and out. Can you imagine? And then, John Ramsey, in his grief, actually moved his daughter's body. Every single one of these actions meant that priceless forensic evidence was probably being destroyed or contaminated. Just gone. And the fallout from all this, it was massive, and it was immediate. The Boulder Police Department got absolutely hammered in the press and by the public. People just lost faith that they could solve it. And that whole narrative of a bungled investigation, it's pretty much stuck to this case ever since. So because the investigation was so flawed, the whole thing basically split into 2 huge competing theories: family versus intruder. And this debate would divide everyone for years. The central debate really boiled down to this: was it someone inside the house, or did an outsider break in? The police, they were laser-focused on the family, John, Patsy, and even their son, Burke. They pointed to their behavior, the weird ransom note, all of it. But the Ramseys never wavered. They insisted an intruder was responsible, pointing to things like an open window in the basement. And for more than 10 years, this cloud of suspicion just hung over the entire family. Imagine that. John, Patsy, and even their son Burke, who is just a kid himself, they were constantly being interviewed by police, hounded by the media. They were basically being tried in the court of public opinion. But then, 2008 happened, and it was a huge turning point. After more than a decade of being the primary suspects, the Boulder DA came out and publicly, formally, cleared the Ramseys. Why? Well, it was all about DNA. New technology had found genetic material on JonBenét's clothes from an unknown male. And that DNA didn't match anyone in the family. Not John, not Patsy, not Burke. So where does all of this leave us? You've got a messed up investigation, these 2 completely different theories, and then this bombshell DNA evidence. What you're left with is just an enduring, painful, and honestly a super frustrating mystery. I mean, even after all this time and all this work, the biggest questions are still just hanging there. Who on earth wrote that ransom note? Who is this mystery man whose DNA was found on her clothes? And you gotta ask, could that DNA evidence have been contaminated from that chaotic crime scene? Was it an intruder after all? Or was it someone the family knew? We just don't know. 29 years. Think about that number. That's almost 3 decades. And in all that time, still no justice for JonBenét. You know, it's easy to get lost in all the theories and the media circus, but at the heart of this is something just incredibly tragic. A 6-year-old girl's life was cut short in the most brutal way, and her family was just completely shattered, all while the entire world watched. And the legacy of this case is about more than just finding a killer. It's become this huge cautionary tale, hasn't it? It really shows us how a media firestorm can completely shape how we see a case, sometimes locking in a story before we even know all the facts. Which brings us to the big, final question, the one we're all still asking. With forensic technology getting better and better every single day, solving cold cases that are decades old, is it possible that science could finally give us the answer? The one that JonBenét Ramsey and all of us have been waiting for?